Hi, my name is Marlen Diane Frost. My maiden name was Willis, Marlen Diane Willis. I was born in Detroit, Michigan on May 16th, 1940. I lived in Detroit for 18 years. My family is from, my parents were from Poland. My father always tells the story that one year it was Poland, one year it was Russia, one year it was Poland. So he wasn't quite sure exactly what country it was when he was born. My mother came to Canada when she was about 2 years old. Her father, who was an Orthodox rabbi, was brought over by the Sault Ste. Marie community in Canada as a shochet, as their ritual slaughterer. And they lived in Canada for about 4 or 5 years, and then that family moved to Detroit. My mother had 3 sisters, all of whom stayed in Detroit, and we lived within maybe 2 blocks of each other. We would see our aunts almost daily. My father came to this country when he was about 12 years old. He was born in, as I said, in either Russia or Poland, whatever it was that week. And his father and grandfather came to this country to set up a business. My great-grandfather was a stone carver. And they came to this country. How they ended up in Detroit, I'm not quite sure, but they did. Then World War I broke out, and they were separated from the family back in Europe. And after the war, my great-grandfather decided he didn't like the United States, so he went back to Poland. And my grandmother and my father came over to this country to be with my grandfather. My father had a younger brother, Leonard was his name, and he died before they got to this country. And after they were here, my grandmother had 2 daughters, and then 10 years later had another daughter. So actually, my father and his youngest sister were more like parent and child than brother and sister. My aunts on that side of the family also lived within 2 or 3 blocks of our house. So I grew up knowing those aunts almost on a daily basis.
Can you tell me the names?
Yes, my aunt on my mother's side, her oldest sister was Bessie, then there was Blanche, and then Mamie. And then on my dad's side, there was Irene, Esther, and Anne. My 3 aunts on my dad's side are still living, and they are still all in Detroit. We had, one aunt had 10 children, one had 5, and the rest had 3. So I had a lot of first cousins around me all the time. On my mother's side of the family, I'm among the youngest, and on my father's side, I'm second oldest of all of the cousins. I have an older brother, Kent, who is still in Detroit. Kent is an attorney. And I have a younger sister, Allie. Her given name was Alta, but she did change it to Allie. And she is a very successful songwriter and has recently had a play on Broadway, The Color Purple. She wrote the words and music to that. So we're all very proud of her. I went to Roosevelt Elementary School, and I remember one day my mother said goodbye to me at home, and I got to school, and there was my mother in the classroom. She was a teacher, and she was substituting at Roosevelt that day in my class. And I said, "Hi, Mommy," and she said, "No, I'm Mrs. Willis." And I remember just not knowing what to do that whole day. And then when I got home from school, there was Mommy. So, but later, when I was in high school and college, my mother was a school teacher in inner city Detroit. She had a 2-year college degree, and while she was in the last couple of years of her life, she died at a young age. She was only 56 when she died. She was back in college because Michigan had changed their rules, and she had to get a 4-year teaching degree. So she was back in school when she died, but she was also still teaching full time. I went through 6th grade at that school, and then went to Durfee, which was an intermediate school. Detroit had this unique situation with the elementary, the middle, and the high school that I went to, because they were all on the same campus. That was the only setup like that in Detroit. But during my 2nd year at Durfee, my family moved, white flight. They moved out to, it was still in the city, but considered almost a suburb. And I went to high school at Mumford High. When we moved, I was in junior high school, and the area at that point didn't have a junior high school. So I ended up having to go back to elementary school, which went through 8th grade, and I can remember just being absolutely mortified that I had to be back in baby school. But the good part was I started high school in 9th grade, so that was all right. Had a great time in high school. I was on the school newspaper. I had lots of friends, one of whom, her name is Denise, I'm still in contact with. And high school was just a fun time for me. I had lots of friends, had lots to do. We had, we had bikes is what we had. And we would get together. We'd go on bike trips throughout the city. Detroit had an extremely good mass transportation system at the time, so that we would get on a bus and we could go downtown, we could get to the parks, we could just go everywhere on the bus, which we did until I was 16, and then I got my driver's license. and when I was 16, my dad got his first Cadillac. He had these big fins in the back, and I was able to drive that car, and you would feel like a queen. And my brother also had a 1956 Chevy convertible. It was bronze and beige, and he also let me drive that. And he took me to get my driver's license because both my parents were working. And it was a very rainy day, and I passed my driver's test, and on the way home, I rear-ended a bus. But my brother was very good. He didn't get too terribly upset, and he did make me drive the rest of the way home, so I was quite fortunate. I graduated high school in 1958 and went to Michigan State University. I went there against my parents' protests. They wanted me to go to either they wanted me to either go to University of Michigan or Wayne State University in Detroit, because that's where most of the Jewish students went. And I decided I really didn't want to have more of high school. I wanted a different experience, and begged and pleaded, and they finally said fine, and I went to Michigan State. And I can remember my mother telling me not to end up marrying a Turk. I don't know where she got that from, but at the time there were about 40,000 students at Michigan State and maybe 500 Jewish students. So there weren't very many, and I went really not knowing anyone. But again, I had a wonderful time. I promised my mother I would go to Hillel, and I went to Hillel the first week, and I met, this guy who happened to be very rude, reached across me to get a pickle because we had Sunday dinner at Hillel, and it was a deli dinner. And he didn't say, excuse me, he didn't say, pass the pickles, and I thought, oh, how rude. And I went back the next week with my roommate, who happened to be Jewish. Her name was Sharon Gurwitz, and she was from South Haven, Michigan. So she also forced her parents to let her come to that university. Anyway, I went back the next week, and this guy was there, and I don't know how it happened, but we left together, and he was walking with me and ended up walking me back to my dorm and asked me if I wanted to go see a concert that was playing at the university that week, and I accepted. I figured to make my mother happy at least. And that was it. I never dated anyone else. I met my husband, Murray Frost, there. Third week I was at school. We started dating, and we were together we were together 42 years, married for 40 years. I got married at the end of my sophomore year. Promised mommy and daddy I would finish, and about a couple months later I was pregnant. so I left school. I left with a flourish. I ended up upchucking in one of my classes and ran out of the class and didn't come back. Had my first child, Michael, when I was 21. He was born in Lansing, Michigan, at Sparrow Hospital on November 13th, 1961. And gorgeous baby. And by that time, my husband had earned his master's degree in political science. He had earned a bachelor's in political science from Brooklyn College in New York City, where he was from. And by the way, his parents weren't too thrilled about him coming to Michigan State either, but he ended up there because they offered him a really good fellowship. But when Michael was a few months old, I decided to go back to school, and my husband finished his coursework for his PhD, and it was time for us to move on. He had been teaching some classes at Lansing Community College, and then got a job offer at California State University in Los Angeles, and we moved to Los Angeles against protests of my parents. Not only was I leaving, but I was taking the only grandson, the only grandchild, but we went, and I can remember my grandmother telling me that in California all we would see would be snakes and Indians. That's all that was there. But, so we went to California, and the first day we were there, we took a walk around the campus, and lo and behold, a snake went across the path, and I thought, oh, Bubby. You know. But we stayed there, and I decided to go back to school. I took a class, and lo and behold, got pregnant. So ended up dropping out before I threw up, but it did drop out again. And my second child, Mandy, was born in Pasadena, California. Excuse me. I'm going to sneeze. Excuse me. September 12th, 1963. She was very small. She was like 5 pounds, maybe 14 or 15 ounces, but she was very long. She was 21 inches. She had hair that you wouldn't believe. So we thought 4 pounds of her was her hair. But we were in California, and at that time I decided I really wanted to do something. So I began teaching Sunday school at, I think it was called the Pasadena Jewish Community Center, and that was a conservative congregation in California, in Pasadena. I had been brought up conservative, and my husband had been brought up Orthodox, so we decided conservative was the way to go. So I taught there for a while, and got pregnant and had my third child, Marcy. She was born August 6, 1965. About a year later, well, a little less than a year later, my husband got a job offer in Santa Barbara, California, actually Goleta, California, doing research at a defense contract company. So we moved to Goleta, California, which was paradise. We really, really loved it there. And we bought our first house and settled in. My kids thrived, and I decided to go back to school. However, I did not get pregnant this time. And I finally finished my degree in 1972, and that was the same year as my husband finished off his dissertation for his doctorate degree in political science. And as it happened, we both graduated on the same day, but he came to mine. I didn't go to his. We really love Santa Barbara, but, and I do blame this on Governor Reagan, who was the governor at the time. The Vietnamese War ended. He didn't have anything to do with that, but he decided to cut the college funding. And since my husband was doing research, he was teaching some classes at Santa Barbara. They cut that, and since the Vietnam War was over, the defense contracts began to shrink, and since his was in social science, that tended to not be quite as important as military research, so his job was eliminated. And that was in 1970. And it was at that point when he said he would finish his dissertation. And it was at that point I thought if we were both home at the same time, with him not working, we would kill each other, so I decided to go back to school at that point. And then 1972, we both finished. He got a job at another research firm and was teaching some classes in Santa Barbara at the university and also in Los Angeles, but it was not full-time work, and he had been out of work for, it was getting close to 2 years, and we had to do something. So he put out some feelers, and a job at University of Nebraska in Omaha at the Center for Urban Research opened up. And as it happened, I ended up getting a job at a friend's shop, and and coming home to tell him I finally got a job, and he told me we were moving to Nebraska. And I thought, oh, I don't believe this. So we ended up coming to Nebraska. He promised no more than 2 years, no more. He swore he would start looking for a job back in California. So we rented our house out, and we came to Omaha, Nebraska in 1974. And we rented a very nice house. We were in the Millard School District, brought the kids who were none of them very happy to have come. We moved here about 3 months before my son's bar mitzvah, which was not a good thing, but we were fortunate enough to be able to have the same date as he had in Santa Barbara. In Santa Barbara, we had joined a Reform congregation because that was the only congregation that was there. So at the time, my children were brought up Reform. Also in Santa Barbara, I was teaching Sunday school and was principal of the religious school there for a while. And so when we came to Omaha, I began teaching at Temple Israel. Started in 74 and finished in 1993, I think. That was the last time I taught there. Anyway, my son did end up having his bar mitzvah in Omaha. We were fortunate enough to get the same date, so he didn't have to learn a new Torah portion or a new Haftarah. And my daughters began religious school here also. They both had their bat mitzvahs at Temple, and all three of them had their confirmations at Temple Israel. And just as an aside, last week I was in Minneapolis, where my youngest daughter lives, and her son Joe went through confirmation, had his confirmation last week. So I'm very pleased with that.
Marlen, let's go back and talk about your parents. About your father and mother.
My parents were dancers. My mother, I found out years and years later, was, I don't know what they called it, but she would dance. At the movie theaters would have little shows in between the movies, and they would have like chorus lines, and Mommy was a chorus girl. She was a few years older than my father. She was 2 years older. They met, I think, as the story goes, she was 16 and he was 14, but she didn't know he was only 14. Anyway, my father was somewhat of an artist and wanted very much to go into graphic arts, but his father owned, at that time, they called it a junkyard, and insisted that he go into the business. And he did let my father graduate high school. That I gather was a fight, but he did graduate high school, and he went into the business. The business grew and grew and grew, and they started not dealing in rags and paper and things like that, and they concentrated on iron and steel. So any Chrysler car between about 1955 and maybe 1980 had some of our metal in it. My dad was very active in the scrap iron federation that they had formed of scrap dealers in Michigan, and then also he became president of the Michigan chapter, and then ended up president of the national chapter which was quite a big deal in our family. My dad, one of his proudest moments and one of my worst moments was in the office when a man came in holding one of his employees, had a gun to the man's head, demanding money. And my dad had been robbed before and was not too happy about that. And my dad pulled the gun. And the guy said, if you don't put the gun down, I'm going to kill him. And my father said, well, if you kill him, I'm going to kill you. You know? And evidently the man, I don't know, I guess you cocked the trigger, whatever you do to the trigger, and my dad shot him and ended up killing the guy. He ended up being a big hero. This man had a very bad record, had killed 3 or 4 scrap dealers in the last couple of years before this incident. And scrap dealers at that point always dealt in cash, so there was always a large amount of cash, and this evidently was known to robbers. So that was not one of the high points in my life, but he kind of enjoyed it. He enjoyed telling his nephews and his great-grandchildren about this, but that was something that I always thought was horrible, and something that he was always very proud of. My mother, as I said, was a teacher, and she worked at a time when women didn't work unless they had to. So I ended up being closer sometimes to my friends' mothers than I was to my own, because she was not home. But she was really a very independent lady. She worked because she wanted to. She was a dedicated teacher. She did what she had to for her students. Unfortunately, she had rheumatic fever when she was a child, and left her with an enlarged heart. And when she was 56, she ended up having an aneurysm, I believe, and died quite unexpectedly. Not even she died in July, and in February my father remarried, which made no one happy except him. He was happy. He married a lady that he did not know before. She actually was the mother of one of my sister's friends, and it was my sister who introduced them. And the marriage was a good marriage. They were married for more than 25 years. However, my brother, my sister, and I never got along with our stepmother. And unfortunately, it strained the relationship with our father. And my stepmother, her name was Esther. And by the way, my mother's name was Rose, and my father's name was Nate. And this lady was Esther. And she kind of turned our family upside down. I'm sure there was blame on both sides, but that always ended up being a strained relationship. She was the only grandmother my children knew, so that I tried very hard to keep the relationship at least on a civil basis. I didn't have to deal with her very much because they lived in Detroit and we were in California, in Omaha. but unfortunately, my brother took the brunt of the ill feelings, and my sister also, but she left when she was 18. She went to University of Wisconsin and never returned to Detroit. My kids.
Let's talk a little bit about your sister and brother first.
All right. My brother was always my idol. He was, he still is, 4 years older than I am. He was a high school football player, very handsome. He married a very gorgeous lady named Barbara, so they were always Ken and Barbie. So, and they were a beautiful couple. My sister was 7 years, and still is 7 years younger. Well, she's not 7 years younger anymore. I refuse to believe that. But I always tell her she's my oldest sister. So, but anyway, she's 7 years younger than I am. She was 16 when my mother died, and she had a hard time with my mother's death. And as I say, she went on to University of Wisconsin, where she was involved with her sorority, Sigma Delta Tau, I believe it was. And she then went to New York, where she started working at Columbia Records. She wrote liner notes for the record albums, and somehow got into writing songs for herself, and decided that her music was as good as some of the stuff that was being recorded. And I think her first hit was an Earth, Wind and Fire song called September, and she's gone on to I don't know how many gold and platinum records she has. She has at least 30 or 40 of them. She is an extremely creative person. She is a risk taker. It's something I admire about her so much. She will give anything a try. She is also an artist. She has done painting, she's done ceramics, she's done sculpture. She's just whatever hits her fancy, she tries. She tried years ago. She was a little ahead of her time, but she had an interactive computer program called Willisville that IBM funded for her. And then after years and years of songwriting, she had an opportunity to work with Alice Walker and some of the other people involved with Color Purple. And she, Stephen Bray, and Brenda Russell, who are two other songwriters, got together and wrote the music for The Color Purple. Play opened on Broadway in December of 2005, I guess, and was an immediate hit. She was nominated for a Tony for the words and music. Unfortunately, didn't win, but she was nominated. And the play has been on Broadway ever since, and it just recently opened in Chicago. About a month before it opened on Broadway, Oprah Winfrey decided to come in on the deal as a producer, so she has had some very close association with Oprah Winfrey. And I was able to go to the Broadway opening, which was unbelievable. I met all kinds of celebrities, and it was just an extremely exciting time. And then in May, just a few weeks ago, I was at the opening in Chicago, and I met Oprah again. And most of the celebrities there were Chicago celebrities, but I don't know how it happened, but I ended up sitting next to Jesse Jackson. Jesse was very stoic the whole show. Didn't clap, didn't laugh, didn't boo, didn't do anything. I felt like giving him a zets in the ribs. But so she's just been just a creative, talented person. She's now working on performing. She'd never really performed before, and now she and another lady have an act. It's Bubbles and Cheesecake. She's Bubbles. And it's really kind of funny because Bubbles is 60 years old, and Cheesecake, I don't know if she's 20. And Bubbles is rather large, and Cheesecake, if she's lucky, weighs 90 pounds. So they're a very odd couple, but they're doing well. They're working on a video, so she is just something else. But
does your brother have a family?
My brother has 2 adopted children, Randy and Lara. Both of, let's see, Randy is in Boston, and I'm not quite sure what he does, but he does something with computers. And then Lara is in Detroit, and she's married and has a little boy, and she's expecting her second child. So, yeah. Now, my sister never married, so no family on that part.
How about, what was a typical dinner night at your home growing up?
Well, our home growing up, typical dinner night was not like other homes at the time. As I say, Mama worked, and so we went out a lot, which was quite unusual for the time. But when we were home, we would be together, especially when I was younger, maybe 7 or 8. When my sister was little and my mom was home, we would eat in our kitchen and listen to the radio. It was one of our family activities. I know my brother and I used to love to listen to Lone Ranger and Green Lantern and all of the mysteries. My mother loved Stella Dallas and some of the soap operas that were on radio. When I was maybe 8 or 9, we got our first television set, and we were one of the first families on the block to have television. So evenings at our house was like a theater. We would have all of the aunts and all of the neighbors would come in to watch television. The screens were, well, it was black and white. It was actually not even white. It was more like yellow and white. And my father got this great big magnifier and put it on, which made everything look green. But he also had lots of records because he and my mother loved to dance. And so we had, I don't know, I think when maybe I was just beginning as a teenager, we had our first hi-fi. And he gave me the old record player, which was wind up. You would crank it to have the records play. But this new one was electric. It was a really, really big deal. My father, before he was in the scrap business, had lots of little odd jobs before that. And one of the things he did, he was a professional wrestler for a while, and he won a few bouts, and I guess this was when it was really wrestling and it wasn't a stage show. But then he had a bout with, I don't remember the person's name, but he was a ranked wrestler and got his tushy beaten and decided wrestling was not for him anymore. So he went to New York for a while because his parents didn't want him to get married because he was so young, and worked as a fry cook for a while. He lived with his aunt, and then decided, nah, that wasn't for him, and he came back to Detroit, and he went to work for I don't know if it was a dentist or a company, a different company that made false teeth. So he made false teeth for a while. And I can remember growing up, he had these rows and rows of teeth on little sticks that were down on his workbench. And by that time, he was in the scrap business. So we kind of had those as toys. We would play with the false teeth. I think his last job before he got into the scrap business was with a friend, John Courtney. He owned a used car lot and sold used cars for a number of years. And then finally, Grandpa won out, and he went into the scrap business. So he was a very strong, physically strong and active person. Didn't retire until he was well into his 70s. Went to work at 6:30 in the morning, came back at 7 in the evening, and he really did do a lot of physical labor. He loved operating the big machinery in his scrap yards, the cranes and the presses and all of the different equipment. And I remember my uncle, who was also in the business, telling him that, you're the boss, you should wear a shirt and tie, you should come into the office, and him saying no, he didn't want to do that. So my uncle was the professional, the front guy, I guess, and my father he worked the yard. So
What was a typical Jewish holiday like at home?
oh, the holidays, when I was very young, as I said, my grandfather was an Orthodox rabbi. So most of the holidays were spent with my mother's family. I can always remember chickens being waved over my head. My grandfather was as I said, a ritual slaughterer. That was how he made his living. And before Yom Kippur, they would whirl a chicken to take away your sins. And my grandfather would swing this live chicken over our heads and then slaughter it. But I do remember that. We would have seders usually at my Aunt Mamie's home because she had the largest dining room. So we would go to her house for seder. Every word was in Hebrew and every word was read. There was no fooling around. As being one of the youngest of the grandchildren, I always had to do the 4 questions until my sister, my younger cousins were able to do them. And I can remember just worrying about not remembering, because we didn't the girls didn't learn Hebrew. My grandfather said that was for men because the men studied the Torah. Women, you want to read, you read Yiddish. So I never went to Hebrew school. I went to Yiddish school. So I couldn't read the Hebrew. I could if I tried, but I didn't. I told everybody I couldn't read Hebrew because Grandpa wouldn't let me. But so I would memorize. I had to memorize the 4 questions, and I knew those things frontwards, backwards, sidewards, and was always just deathly afraid I would mess up. But and then I can always remember we always did the second half of the Seder. There was no fooling around, boy. You came back and those things would go till midnight. And we couldn't horse around, which was somewhat of a trial. So, but,
What's going on in your life since you finished teaching at Temple?
Well,
what have you done to keep busy?
I retired last year, finally, for the last time, which, and of course I'm working again, but for, what was it, about 11 years, I was the director of the Jewish Community Center Department of Early Childhood Education. And I started working at the J right when I moved to Omaha. I started as a teacher in the Cultural Arts Department. I taught cake decorating. And then Chuck Arnold, who was heading the children's department as well as the PE department, asked me if I would do a cooking class for kids. And I did. And somehow, I don't remember how I even heard about it, but I heard there was a position as a teacher available at the preschool, and I got that job. And I worked as a teacher for about 1.5 years, and the preschool director, Jessie Rasmussen, who went on to really greater things, bigger and better, she left, and I took over as preschool director and was here for, was at the J for about 11 years after that. And then an opportunity came up at the Omaha Schools Foundation for director of their early childhood programs. And that, what they did was operate the before and after school child care programs for the Omaha Public Schools. And I thought it was time for a change, so I went there and retired last year after 15 years doing that. I also did and still do teach CPR and first aid for American Red Cross, and I couldn't sit home, so I decided I got I'm now teaching part-time for Metro Community College. I'm teaching GED classes to adults and finding that really, really a lot of fun. So I've gone from preschool to elementary to adults. So I'm running out of people to teach, I think. I'd like to acknowledge and have everybody know about my husband, Murray Frost. Murray was born in New York City, June 7th, 1937, and was, I think, from day one a scholar. He loved learning. He loved books. He loved researching things. He started at a fairly young age to be a stamp collector, and that hobby carried through to the end of his life. He went to high school, went to college, went to graduate school. He had a brother, Charlie, and a sister, Elsie. 3 kids who grew up very poor. His father worked as a tailor in the garment industry in New York. It was seasonal work, so there were times of the year when the family was on welfare. But education was a value in that family, and books were part of the landscape. And the 3 kids, all 3 kids graduated college. His brother ended up with a master's degree in library science and was a librarian for the New York Public Library. His sister had a master's degree in accounting and then went back in her 60s and got a law degree, and to this day, well into her 70s, she is a practicing attorney. And then my husband, who ended up with a PhD. So from very, very humble beginnings, they ended up with a very well-educated family. Murray's love was his stamps, and me, but he had an avid interest in the Holocaust. It was something that captured his imagination. Read everything he possibly could on the subject, and started as one of his collections Holocaust. Unlike most stamp collectors, he didn't care about value of the stamp, and he didn't care about perforations or postmarks or anything like that. What he was interested in was the story that the stamp told, and he would get these stamps and find out the background, what they commemorated. And I think one of the highlights of his life was in 1990, I think it was 93, the Dutch government paid for him to come over to bring his Holocaust exhibit, and it was on display at their war museum for a couple of months, commemorating the 50th anniversary of the Warsaw Uprising. And when we went over there, he was just in hoggy heaven. He met the ambassadors, he met all kinds of people, and having that display at that museum was really a wonderful experience for him. His Judaism was always a big factor in his life, and again, through his stamps, he learned more about Judaism than you would think possible. He collected stamps on every Jewish subject. Whenever there was a new issue of a Jewish stamp, or a stamp that had any kind of Jewish connection, he would get it and research it, and volumes and volumes and volumes of stamps with write-ups about each stamp. I have those still. He was a very thoughtful person, always a very liberal thinker, always concerned about the welfare of others, and would fight for the welfare of others. I can remember one time our daughter Mandy, it was very soon after we came to Omaha. We were at the Omaha County Fair, and she was walking around and went to one of the concessions there, and the man at the concession wanted to know her name, and she said Mandy, and he said, "That's a nigger name." And she was upset. She was very upset. And, she came and told us what the man said. And I can remember my husband going up to the guy, and this was no little guy. He was a great big bruiser, and just really kind of telling him off. And he didn't let it end there. He wrote whoever's in charge of the county fair, wrote them a letter and told them not so much that my daughter was hurt, but what kind of a thing is that for someone to say at a public function. And when my kids were in school, they were in the Millard School District, and at that time there were not many Jewish kids there. And they were having a Christmas program. And my husband went to a school board meeting to protest the school having a Christmas program. He said he didn't care if you want to discuss religion, and if you want to discuss Christianity in school. It is a major religion, we understand that. Let's do it in October. Let's not do it Christmas time. Stan Mitchell, and Marty Wolf went to the school board and told them it wasn't necessarily anti-Christmas in school. It was anti-religion. They didn't want to have a Hanukkah celebration in school either. That would be just as unconstitutional as celebrating Christmas. So he was not afraid to stand up for his rights and the rights of others. If you made the mistake of asking him a question on a subject, you would end up with volumes and volumes and volumes of material. I can remember my daughter once calling and asking him a question on something, and him sending her all of this information that was more than she really wanted. He was just a really great dad, because he was a professor for a couple of the early years of my children's lives. He was home a lot because of his schedule. So I think he had more interaction with his children than a lot of other dads did at that time. He was active in the PTA, which was almost unheard of. But he did love to be with his kids. He loved taking his kids to the beach in California. We went rather frequently. In 1999, he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Murray was chairman of the library of the Jewish Federation for a number of years, and really put his heart and soul into the library. He thought it was so very important to the community, and was very proud of the fact that we had one of the best Jewish libraries in the country, if not just the Midwest. He also served on the Jewish Federation Board for a number of years, and thought that the work of the Jewish community was very important and something which he wanted to be involved with. Unfortunately, in 1999, he developed pancreatic cancer. He underwent a procedure called a Whipple operation that prolonged his life a little bit, but in 2006 excuse me. But in 2000, it was pretty evident that he was not going to make it. He then decided, since research had been so important to him and part of his life, he volunteered for a couple of research studies at the University of Nebraska Medical Center, and was he was really thrilled that in the last stages of his life that he might be doing something that would help people in the future. He pretty well knew it wasn't going to help him, but he thought even if it eliminated some possibilities for people, it would be worthwhile. And he died in September of 2000 after really a courageous battle. And he is missed. We miss him every day. My favorite subject are my kids, my three wonderful children, Michael, Mandy, and Marcy. Michael is in Virginia, in the Washington, D.C. area. He works for the Society of Human Resource Management as he handles their web, does something with computers. He is an extremely creative guy, loves to play guitar. He is married to Shelley Sperry, the most wonderful daughter-in-law in the world, and they have a little girl, Mari. Mari came into their lives after they were married 19 years, and Mari, they adopted her from China, and she now is 6 years old, and they are waiting for their second child coming from China. My daughter Mandy, married to Don Becker, and I tease my son-in-laws. They're in the race for best son-in-law. they're in the top two. So depending on which week it is, who's the favorite. But no, Don is an engineer here, and Mandy is a technical writer, and she writes computer manuals. I am amazed at that. But Mandy lives in Omaha, and she and her husband are quite happy in Omaha. And then my youngest daughter is Marcy, and Marcy recently remarried. She married Mark Ratner in 2006. And Marcy has two sons, Joseph and Thomas. And as I said, Joseph just recently was confirmed in Minneapolis, and he is 16 and Tom is 14. And Marcy is an attorney and doing rather well. We get together too infrequently. Since it's easier for me to travel than it is for either my son or daughter, I do get to visit some pretty nice places. Washington, D.C. area is lovely, and I always have a great time when I'm with Mike and his family. And Marcy is in the Minneapolis area, so that's not a very long drive, and I'm up there quite frequently. But my kids are the light of my life. They are all, I'm just very proud of all three of them. They grew up to be great people. They're all kind and caring people. They are very charitable people, and just the light of my life. And their kids are just the best grandkids one could ask for. I'm going to close this by telling the people I love how important they are to me and how much I love them. My brother Kent and his wife Barbara and their 2 children, Randy and Laura. I love you dearly. My sister Allie, love you dearly. My son Mike, his wife Shelley, and daughter Mari, and the one to soon come, I love you very, very much. My daughter Mandy and her husband Don, love you very much. Marcy and her husband Mark and her sons Tom and Joe, I love you very, very much. I'm so very glad that you're all part of my life.